London, 1888. Emily Hollins walks the dark streets of the notorious East End. Little does she know she will bear witness to the first victim of one of the world's most infamous serial killers. The way the body was discovered sent chills down the spines of the police and the community of East End. Many have never seen such horrific mutilations to a person, which raised the question of who could do such a thing. Over the coming weeks, it would become clear that a figure only known as Jack the Ripper is responsible for that death, and countless more. Who is Jack the Ripper, and how have his murders remained a talking point a century after they happened? We will discuss on today's episode of The Amateur Historian. Hello everyone and welcome to a special Halloween episode of The Amateur Historian. As always, I'm your host Michael McDonald, and before we get into today's story, I am discussing a sensitive topic not suited for all audience, so viewer discretion is advised. With that, let's take a look into the gruesome murders of Jack the Ripper. Britain in the 19th century had a large immigration boom to all its major industrial cities. The parish of Whitechapel in London's East End in particular became extremely overcrowded with 80,000 residents by the year 1888. Due to that, the conditions of Whitechapel were poor to say the least. Disease, robbery, and violence were a common practice in the harsh streets. Economic problems also hit hard with the large immigration of new foreign workers. This led to a rise in social tension in certain factions in the East End. The East End was also a breeding ground for brothels and prostitution, which is a common theme in these upcoming murders. Scotland Yard released a statement in the late summer of 1888 that 62 brothels with 1,200 plus workers operated in the area. With the seasons about to change, a new problem was arriving, one more devastating and careless than anyone has ever seen. From April 3, 1888 to February 13, 1891, 11 homicides of prostitutes in the East End were violently murdered in horrific ways. The time frame of these murders got lumped together by police as the Whitechapel murders. The first two women murdered were Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Tamabram. The first to be killed was Miss Smith, who was later discovered to be killed by local gang violence rather than the Ripper. As for Martha Tamabram, her murder on August 7, 1888, had some striking similarities to future Ripper killings, but was considered by police to not be related due to different wound patterns than the future murders. Out of the 9 remaining murders, only 5 can be linked to the mysterious person of Jack the Ripper. The canonical 5, as they're known, are the only victims known to be killed by the Ripper. The women's are named as followed in order of their death: Mary Ann Nicholas, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Edos, and Mary Jane Kelly. Mary Ann Nicholas is by most accounts the first victim killed by the Ripper. Mary's body was discovered on August 31, 1888, near the street of Buck's Row. How she was found was by a former roommate, who was one Miss Emily Hollins. What Miss Hollins found would scare the sight out of her. Mary's wounds consisted of 2 deep throat slices and stabs in a variety of places in her abdomen and genitals. Her abdomen wounds were so bad that her bowels were protruding, she says. A later report claims that the murder weapon used was a knife. A week later, on September 8th, a second murder was reported. Annie Chapman was found in her backyard on 29 Hanover Street. A similar wound pattern was consistent with the likes of Mary Ann's body, although there were a few small differences. Annie's small intestines were placed above her right shoulder. Later, her autopsy revealed sections of her uterus and bladder were removed and could not be recovered. Unlike the last murder, Annie did have an eyewitness of sorts. A neighbor claimed she saw Annie outside of her home at 5:30 a.m. with a dark-haired man. They were speaking to each other, but all she could hear was the man asking, "Will you?" which Annie replied, "Yes." A half hour later, the body was discovered and the trail went cold on the dark-haired man. The next set of murders happened on the same day, on the morning of September 30th. The police gave these murders a special name, which they coined the double event. Elizabeth Stride was the first to be discovered at 1 a.m. in Duffield Yard. Her COD was a single cut across the throat. Other than that, no other mutilations were found, which many argue if this could be the Ripper. Some say it is, and that the Ripper was potentially interrupted, forcing him to leave the body and find his next victim, Catherine Edos. But before we move to Catherine's murder, once again several eyewitnesses saw Elizabeth with a man before the time of her death. Unfortunately, all the witnesses gave different accounts of what the man looked like, bringing up no leads. As for Catherine, her body was discovered in Mature Square in the city of London, about an hour after the discovery of Elizabeth. This murder had the Ripper's name written all over it. By that time, Catherine was the worst body that was discovered. Her wounds consisted of a cut throat, intestines placed over her right shoulder, and part of her genitals removed. Her left kidney was missing, and her face was seriously disfigured. A police surgeon later stated that Catherine's mutilations could have been done in at least 5 minutes. The next and final murder of the Ripper took place a month later, and the victim was Mary Jane Kelly. Her body was discovered on November 9th at her home in 13 Miller's Court. Kelly was classified as the worst body discovered during the Canonical Five. Kelly's wounds consisted of her face being unrecognizable due to it being hacked at. Her throat was slit all the way down to her spine, plus the usual stab and incisions on the body. The only difference with her murder, which is the most horrifying aspect of her murder, was that Kelly's heart was completely gone and it could not be recovered by police. After Kelly's death, the murders died down until 4 other unrelated murders popped up, which not had the Ripper's MO. With that, in 1891, the case was shut on the Whitechapel murders. Even though the cases were closed, the police never truly found the identity of Jack the Ripper. Many suggested that his precision of the mutilation on his bodies could mean that his profession might be a butcher or doctor. Due to this, those businesses in the East End were hurt in part of local mistrust of those professions in their community. Many others believed that he was an educated upper-class man in high society who came to the East End to get his psychopathic urges released. All in all, no leads ever came up, except on one occasion where the Ripper himself coined his own name. A letter the Ripper wrote was sent to the Central News Agency on September 27, 1888. The letter, titled Dear Boss, gained more attention after Catherine Edo's murder broke. In the letter, the Ripper said he will cut off the earlobe of his next victim. Sure enough, Catherine was missing an earlobe. The outlet sent the letter straight to the police, where they couldn't gain any more information from it. He was a smart and calculated killer, and all the police could do was wait, because the last sentence in his letter goes, "My knife is so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away, if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." Thank you again for tuning in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to be up to date on new episodes. As always, I'm Michael McDonald, and this is The Amateur Historian, signing off.